Welcome to Driving to the Hoops Basketball Diaries. This is Clint. Was just kind of driving around, was thinking about different positions. I've done point guards, power forwards, centers, small forwards, but one position I haven't done is shooting guards, and I want to kind of give like a rundown on the best shooting guards from the old school if you're not too familiar with them. If you were to go chronologically, start way back into the 50s really, and let me just backtrack. The shooting guard position was actually my favorite position growing up because I felt like I want to be a wing player. I want to play out on the perimeter a little bit because I was taller than most kids. I ended up playing down in the post a lot, which made me a little less than enthusiastic about it at times, but it is what it is. My favorite position, small forward, but when I was younger, like as a younger kid, it was a two guard. And I think that was because of guys like Jordan and a couple others. So, but again, going chronologically, going back to the 50s, you really have to start with guys like Bill Sharman, great free throw shooter, great scorer, played for the Celtics, kind of that overlap from the early Celtics to the Bill Russell Celtics. A really good, solid shooting guard. And then he was kind of replaced by a guy named Sam Jones, who was an amazing shooting guard for his era. Usually, a lot of times, I should say anyway, he was the leading scorer for the Celtics during that run with Bill Russell when they won 11 championships in 13 seasons. He was just a consistent guy, very clutch, hit a lot of big shots in the playoffs and finals. Not quite the player that guys like the next person we'll mention is Jerry West, for example. Not quite on that level, but he had more success on a team level. But he wasn't the individual player that Jerry West was, because Jerry West was, up until Jordan, without question, he was the best shooting guard of all time. I mean, he played in, I don't know how many finals he played in, but he had some monster series. Lost most of them because the Celtics were just a better team. But he has a distinction of, being the only player on the losing team in the finals to win the finals MVP. That's how great he was in 1969. But the Celtics come out on top in Game 7 in LA, no less. And it was just one of the biggest upsets ever. But Jerry West just played his heart out. And he was a winner, and he didn't win but one championship, and that was in 1972 on that great Lakers team that had Gail Goodrich, Will Chamberlain, and then of course himself, Jerry West. And if you're kind of going along, so I try not to include combo guards because guys like Oscar Robertson, he was just a guard. Like, he was just a great guard who could kind of do everything. But if you were going to call him a shooting guard, then he would be in that conversation like West and then later Jordan as the best shooting guard of all time. I mean, this was a guy that averaged a triple-double. He 30 points a game in several seasons. Just unbelievably good. Just an amazing player. And he had a little bit of success, I know, later in his career with the Milwaukee Bucks. He had the championship there with Lou Alcindor, later known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But just a guy that was a stat filler, just a dominant player. Had a lot of hop, a lot of spring in his leg. I know he's not really known for that, but I've seen photos and videos where his elbows were up over the rim. I mean, he was just so athletic and just dominant. Especially in the early parts of his career. And as you kind of go along, there was, a couple of filler guys like Dave Bing, led the league in scoring one year, good shooting guard in the 60s and 70s. And Hal Greer, he was kind of a point guard too, but Hal Greer, one of those combo guards that just shoot the lights out, and he was on that great 60 1967 76ers team with Wilt Chamberlain. That it's one of the best teams ever when you look at their record. And just kind of going along, you had Earl the Pearl Monroe, who was on that good Bullets team, and then later with the Knicks when they won that championship. He was on the 73 championship. That was a really good team, Earl the Pearl Monroe. And then you had innovative type players like Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete. Most people have heard of him. Such a dominant college player, averaging 44 points a game, still a record, still has NCAA total points. Just an unbelievably good player. Didn't have a lot of success. I think a lot of players, if they were put in the position that Pistol Pete was put in, they would have done kind of similar numbers. You know, his dad was a coach at LSU where he played college, and then in the pros he was still really good, putting up good scoring numbers, but never had any sort of playoff success. As a matter of fact, he only made the playoffs maybe 2 or 3 seasons his entire career, and one of those was his last year with the Boston Celtics in 1980. And to be honest with you, it's kind of maybe a bad thing to say, but I felt like he kind of hurt them against the Sixers in that series where they lost. Boston lost the Sixers. He had that shooter's mindset. He's going to shoot his way out of a slump, and he just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn in that last game. And he just kept shooting shots, and they just weren't going, and he's turning the ball over. It was time for him to retire, so he retired after that. Now, one of my favorite players, if you've seen some of my videos, is a shooting guard named George Gervin, the Iceman. I love his style of play. Such an efficient scorer. Guy shot 51 or 52% from the field as a shooting guard for his career. That's pretty crazy. That's high. He come from the ABA pedigree. Just a great scorer. Led the league 4 times, and up until his retirement, only Wilt Chamberlain had done that more times, and then of course Jordan led the league more later too, and a couple other guys like Allen Iverson, maybe Durant or LeBron. But Iceman, if you get a chance to watch some of his highlights, there's a lot of highlights with George Gervin on YouTube and places like that that you can see his play style. And then in the 80s, you had a pretty big influx of shooting guards that come around. You had Clyde Drexler, you had Michael Jordan, obviously, Reggie Miller, and kind of some other wing players that could play shooting guard. You had like Sidney Moncrief. These were really all quality players. Obviously Jordan was the cream of the crop, but Clyde Drexler is a guy that had a lot of success with Portland, went to the finals twice, just couldn't get over the hump. And then later with Houston, he won a championship in '95. And of course Jordan, obviously the greatest shooting guard of all time, in my opinion, and probably will always be that. I mean, he's that good and that dominant. Like I said, Reggie Miller's sharpshooter with amazing clutch abilities, never could get over the hump himself, but was such a great player on one team, and I really respect that a lot. I do like seeing players jump around a little bit sometimes. I don't know why, it's been a thing for me, but I also really respect guys that stay with one team their entire career. And Reggie Miller did that. So, you know, like I said, a sniper type shooter. Sidney Moncrief, overall, just a good player, really good at everything, defensive style player. Kind of a lockdown defensive player, but he could also give you 18, 20 points a game, a couple of assists. More of a combo guard because he could play 1, 2, or even 3. He had that kind of ability. One guy I forgot about, I'll backtrack a little bit. He was a little before those guys, but was David Thompson. I've talked about him before in my ABA video, but he was just such an amazing player. He kind of had a small window in which he played in due to injuries and some personal issues. But his prime, he was as good a shooting guard as ever was. And when you look at his athletic ability, 42, 44-inch vertical, that was a lot back then. It's still a lot now, but it was especially a lot in the 1970s when a guy 6'3" is up there hitting his head on the rim, blocking center shots and people like that. So great player there, obviously. Then a little bit later, you had some guys come around like Mitch Richmond, Rex Chapman. Mitch Richmond was Hall of Famer, great player. Kind of one of those, not a bully ball type guard, but he was built like a brick house. I'll just say that. He was strong, could shoot, could jump. You know, he's just a great shooting guard. One of those guys that he was up there with Jordan as probably the second best shooting guard at one point in his career in the NBA. He was that good. Kind of gets forgotten. He didn't have a ton of success, but he was good. He had a good career for sure. And then kind of cruising along, obviously, Kobe Bryant. I wasn't sure what was going to happen with him. I remember when he first come into the league, I was in high school, and I was like, he's so skinny, you know, he's got a nice shot. He can jump. I don't know, maybe he'll be okay. And he turned out to be right there with Jordan in a lot of ways. And I'm not a big Kobe fan, to be honest with you, but I understand after he retired, and of course after he passed away, how great he was. He had the best final game ever, and I never understood why guys, if it was their last game, why did they not go all out? And Kobe went all out, and he scored 60 points his last game in the NBA, which I love that. I became a Kobe fan his last game, basically. I was like, man, this guy, that's what I'm talking about. Like, leave it all out on the court, and he did it. Allen Iverson, another shooting guard from that era, the late 90s, early 2000s. He's one of my three favorite players. I love Allen Iverson, how he played, how he, wore his heart on his sleeve. So tough. Scored a lot. Not the most efficient scorer, obviously. He scored, or he shot in the 45%-ish range, probably a little lower than that for his career. But he did a lot of other things on the court that made him a winner. He wasn't just out there getting 40 and losing every game. He was a winner, and he was very competitive. So I always respected him a lot. And then, of course, Ray Allen, dead-eye shooter, was the three-point leading all-time leader. I think Steph Curry passed him. If he didn't, anytime now he will. He was such a great scorer and shooter. I had a lot of respect for him as well. Tracy McGrady, who was a player that I thought at one time, and I've had this conversation with people, and they're like, nah, you're crazy. But there was a short period of time where there was a possibility that there was a 6'8", 220-pound chiseled guy who was just smooth as silk, could shoot. When he's kind of a streak shooter, but when he got hot, no one could stop him. He was super athletic. I didn't know where his career was going to go, but there was a possibility that he was going to be up there in that Jordan range. That's how good he was. Obviously, that didn't happen. It didn't pan out in that way, but he was really, really good, and he led the league in scoring, and just a great player. It's unfortunate he had some injuries that really slowed him down a lot about midway through his career, or not even midway. So anyway, just wanted to go through some shooting guards. Any thoughts that you have, I love to see comments, and please like the video, and of course subscribe. Hope y'all have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.